Thank you. I was laughing backstage. They're playing the intro to AC/DC Highway to Hell because when my wife was asking me I was asking her what we should play to walk out, and I said maybe Stairway to Heaven, and my 5-year-old heard me, and he said we should play the theme song to Megamind, which happened to be the exact opposite of Stairway to Heaven. So he kind of rules the roost along with the other two boys, but it's great to be here, and I really like this venue. I think it's got a lot of character. It reminds me of the Sanger Theater back in Mobile, where I'm from. And how's it been so far? Have y'all had a good day and a half? Excellent. Well, what I want to talk to you about is the opportunities I had and the privilege I had to lead men in combat in Afghanistan and in other places of the world, and then how we're bringing that back and we're kind of transforming the teams that I've been fortunate enough to join up with back in my hometown of Mobile. But to really give you an understanding of that, I'm going to share my personal narrative, and what I ask is that you pretend that we've known each other longer than right now, this interaction, because I've got some vulnerable moments in my life that I want to share, because and I think it's important to recognize that all of us have moments of failure, and it's how we bounce back. It's how we get up and not let that define us and learn from it and get better because of it. And 68 Ventures, where I'm Chief Operating and Leadership Officer, is a parent holding company for numerous businesses and development, business development and real estate development companies that really, what we do is we look at it as real estate is not our purpose, it's our platform. Our purpose is to see all we can do with all we've been given. We've been very fortunate with the growth that this organization and the subsidiaries have seen over the last 4 or 5 years, and that means that we have more influence in our communities, and we have to be good stewards and responsible for what that looks like as we continue to grow, because we want to take it much further than the Gulf Coast. And so with that, why is our work so important? And it's really because there is a leadership crisis. This was at the World Economic Forum when they asked what everybody thought on the survey. 86% think there's a leadership crisis in the world today. And I know a lot of you are here for this conference to gain little nuggets of knowledge on how you can better portray your leadership inside your organization, how you can think unconventionally, how you can think outside the box. And that's what we try to do too, each and every day. And I don't think we hit a home run every day, but we try, and we got to get back up and keep going. And I serve on the board of directors for the Mobile Chamber of Commerce, and we published a newsletter this spring, and it was a Gallup poll about employee engagement. And I know the Studer Community Institute also has their version of a employee engagement survey that I would highly recommend you look at doing with your organizations to get some good candid feedback. But the results of that Gallup poll, I think there were 6 states that were included in the Southeast in that study, and the Chamber thought it would be a good thing to talk about and celebrate how Alabama had the highest employee engagement at in my opinion, abysmal 37%. So that was celebrating mediocrity across the Southeast, in my humble opinion, because 63% of the workforce is disengaged. So how do we change that? What do we need to do inside our organizations to get better, to connect with our people, so that we can inspire them and get that commitment and drive that we hope for? So a little bit about me. I know you heard it. I'm from Mobile. A defining moment in my life was when I went up to college at Hampton-Sydney. Does anybody know where Hampton-Sydney College is? A few of you. Small school up in Southside, Virginia. And, you know, up to this point, I'd had a pretty easy life. Certainly grew up a privileged child and had the opportunity to go to college. I went to Hampton-Sydney in my sophomore year is when 9/11 happened. And that lit a fire inside me that sent me on that trajectory. And the individual you see right here who became my mentor was General Sam Wilson. And General Sam, as we all called him, he was President Emeritus of Hampton-Sydney College, And he taught 3 classes. He taught a U.S. intelligence class, a national security class, and a leadership and ethics class. And probably the one that had the most profound impact on me was that leadership and ethics class. It was for seniors only, and it was for anybody that was on campus in a leadership position. So there were 11 of us that got together on Wednesday nights around a round table, and we ran through leadership scenarios and situations and reported to the class, and then we broke it down kind of in an after-action review type of format and really dissected that. General Sam pulled us in to an auditorium a little bit larger than this after 9/11, and he gave us the state of things. We didn't really know, the media didn't really know, but this man, this noble giant, was former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He was deputy to the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, which was George H.W. Bush, and he was one of Merrill's Marauders, which Merrill's Marauders, if you're not familiar, were 5307th Composite Unit, and I see some folks shaking their head. They were sent on a suicide mission in Burma, a few thousand to serve under General Merrill, and only a few hundred came back behind Japanese lines, reporting on their positions. And General Sam was a young lieutenant at the time, and he's one of the ones that returned and lived the rest of his life with malaria and other ailments that he had from spending that time in the jungles in his illustrious career in the military as well. But when he gave us the state of things, that's when I had that moment of reflection, and I said, what can I do? I need to test my limits. I need to step outside my comfort zone, and I want to serve. I want to see if I can get elected to these leadership positions on an academic bubble, sheltered community like a Hampton-Sydney College, a D3 school. Do I have what it takes to lead different individuals from all walks of life? Not only do I have what it takes to lead, but can I take them overseas in harm's way and be their platoon leader, be their detachment commander? And so I thought about dropping out of college, and my parents and General Sam talked me out of it. I remember him sitting me down and saying, this war's not going anywhere. Get your college degree, and if you still feel the way you do, then you can jump right back in and you'll be in the fight in no time. And so I continued to learn from him for the rest of the time I had in college. And the 2 quotes I have up here were really, the first one is what he always impressed upon us. And think about it in your context in the business sense. Take care of the men, because he was talking about a combat infantry team, and just put it with people. Put it with human beings. You take care of the people will take care of you. That is about as simple yet as in depth as anything that you'll hear, in my opinion. Because if you take care of those around you and you do more than just scratch the surface, which we'll talk about, then you're going to get that return, because they know you care. And caring matters. When I invested in the soldiers that I was fortunate enough to be with, I got that return. It took time, and it's not going to be transactional. It's not going to be overnight. But as a leader, you continue to show up, and you continue to do the right things. And that was one that always stuck with me, because I know that's how he lived his life. And the other one was when he returned from World War II. He had been battlefield promoted from a private to a young lieutenant. He had lied about his age. He heard Churchill's speech, we'll fight them on the beaches, we'll fight them in the streets, we'll never give up, we'll never surrender. That was his fire that was ignited, and he went to the local armory, lied about his age, and he joined the military and enlisted. And when he came home, he was a decorated war hero at the age of 20. And the town of Rice, Virginia, threw a parade for him, and he was on his high horse. I mean, think about where you were at 20 years old, and if the whole town has come together to celebrate you for what you did. And so his dad sat him down that night. I think he had a hot date, he said, and he was getting ready for that, getting dressed. And he said, Sammy, listen to me. And he knew when his dad said that he needed to stop what he was doing. And he turned around, he said, you know, your mother and I are very proud of you, and we love you deeply. He said, but never forget this. When you think you're green, you'll continue to grow. And when you think you're ripe, you've already begun to rot. And he lived his life that way. And that quote is always something that I try to keep full circle, not only for me, but for those that I interact with, because it's about eating from the humble pie. You watch a lot of successful people that go like this on a trajectory. And if they're not in tune with reality, then they're going to come right back down. And if they're not grateful for the opportunities that they have and realize what that allows them or enables them to do, then they're not going to live that well-examined, well-lived life. And he did this all the way up until the day he died in June of this year, and was a remarkable servant leader and an example for me to follow and countless others that walked through those gates at Hampton-Sydney College. But I share that with you because hopefully everybody in this room is going to either you're there, you're on your way, or you're scratching the surface to success. And never forget where you came from and the people that helped you do it, because he's one of those ones that helped me all along the way. And we can look at all the accolades that you may collect over time. And I know that the Studer Community Institute is a firm believer in this too, but be a perpetual learner. He made it to 93 years old because he never quit learning. When his body failed him, his mind never shut down, because he knew there was always something else. There was always the next generation that he could learn from. So have that thirst and that hunger for knowledge and the ability to examine it as you examine where you are, what your business plan is, how big your team is, and all those opportunities you have to lead. So I went on to graduate from Hampton-Sydney, and I went out west and worked with some friends at a ranch while I was training to get ready to go into the service. And then I came back and enlisted to go through 09 Sierra, and went to basic training and officer candidate school. And I kept this at the forefront of my mind too. This was something we learned in General Sam's class, and I would later go on to see in Special Forces training. But it's the first truth that we live by, and that's humans are more important than hardware. And you can see why up there on the slide, but don't look at it as an object. Don't look at the people that you have as objects. Treat them as people. Understand where they're coming from, and realize that when you do that, you're going to get this. And that's what we have to do as Green Berets. You got 12 men, to include the officer, and you're out there anywhere in the world at any given time. They're out there right now. And you have to be a force multiplier. You have to have the confidence and the competency to go out there with your skill sets and train up to 1,000 indigenous or host nation forces, or if you're operating in some what we call the VUCA environments, the volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environments, then you've got to be willing to depend on the person to your left and right. You got to know that they can handle whatever comes. And you've got to be able to treat everybody that you interact with like this. Because if we don't invest in those locals that we're working with, then we're not going to get that result. And if that's what our mission is, we will fail. So that was one that always stuck with me too, is never forget that humans are more important than hardware. And as my career progressed, I went to officer candidate school after basic training. And that was at Fort Benning, Georgia. And I ran into another kind of noble giant servant leader named Johnny Craver. And Johnny was a prior service enlisted sergeant first class. And the way it works when you show up at officer candidate school is you got the guys right off the streets that don't know anything, still wet behind the ears like me. And you've got these individuals who was probably, I think, 13 years older than me, who had a lot of life experience, who had been enlisted, who now wanted to become an officer because he had a college degree. And so we're a mixed bag. And when you show up, there's a lot of animosity because these individuals, they know everything inside the Army, and you know nothing. And so going back to humility, you show up and you try to learn and absorb from them. And this guy was kind enough to take some of us under his wing and really start training and mentoring us as a peer mentor of sorts. He knew the materials better than most of the instructors because he was a Ranger instructor. Has anybody ever seen the Best Ranger competition on the Discovery Channel? So Johnny was a competitor, I believe, in 2005, and then he joined me in officer candidate school right after he finished competing for the Best Ranger competition. So he knew the material, and he was in amazing shape, and so the instructors let him lead. They let him take charge of a lot of the courses, especially when we were out in the woods, going through the tactics, the techniques, and the procedures. And we graduated together that August, became young second lieutenants. Johnny was older. And then we went to the infantry officer basic course together. And so what you do in the military, for those of you that don't know, is you go to whatever your occupational specialty is. So as an 11 Alpha, as an infantry officer, then I need to go learn more about the officer side of mission planning, of personnel management, of leadership, all those things that they want to teach you. It's another 6 months, and it's a week in the field, being out in the woods, and it's a week back in the classroom. So I was very, very lucky because Johnny was in my platoon. And again, he took charge every time we went into the field. And what I loved about this man was he, in his spare time with 3 young kids and a beautiful and loving wife, he would meet us out at the Ranger camp at Camp Rogers to run the roads with us and show us the challenges we were going to be facing as we were preparing for Ranger School. He would do that. He would take us on, show us the terrain in the woods, talk about areas we're going to have issues. He was laughing. He was like, "You're going to get so hemmed up right here. It's going to be marvelous. I wish I could be out here to watch it." And he really just developed us and gave us that confidence we needed going into Ranger School. Because as an infantry officer, that Ranger tab that goes on your left shoulder, that's your credibility badge. You show up at a unit and you don't have that as an infantry officer, people are they're going to question why you didn't go. Why did you not want to walk the walk if you're going to come be our leader? And it's tough. And you don't want to have to show up already at a disadvantage for the way that people are going to look at you and what's expected of you as a leader. So we graduate from infantry officer basic course and we're off to Ranger School. Johnny gives each of us a Ranger tab to sew into our hat before we go. And I'll show you a picture of the 3 guys that I went with. And he gave each of us a Ranger tab to sew in our hat, and that's your drive on tab. And what that means is when you start feeling sorry for yourself and you wonder if you can continue doing it, you pull out your hat and you look at that and you remember what your goal is and what you set out to accomplish. And you can rub it, you can smell it, you can do whatever you want, whatever works for you. But that's essentially the message, is there's been a lot of people that have walked in this same path and these footsteps. And if they've been able to do it, why should you quit, or why should you think that you can't? So off we go, and that first week is called RAP Week. It's Ranger Assessment Program, and they're testing you on all your technical skills while making a very stressful environment. You're not sleeping, you're not eating, you're taking all your instructions essentially very concise and brief, and then you've got to do all these different things. You're standing with your rucksack on at night in a gravel pit, essentially, waiting and waiting and waiting. So it starts to really break you down mentally. And what we did to counter that is probably the second or third night, you'll see a bunch of grown men standing like this, and you can't talk, you're in silence, and they're standing like this, and we would kind of communicate just by eye contact, and we'd be betting on who was going to fall asleep standing up and just fall like a tree right onto their face because they were so tired. And it was small victories because we could laugh about it. You can get that guy back up, you put him back in the formation, and you'd continue to assess who the next person was going to be until it was you, which I think everybody had that moment. And first week was going as well as it could, and we were at the very final point of it, which was the land navigation course. And the land navigation course starts around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and it runs through daylight. And I think that our objective was we had to find 5 points. If you found 6, then you got a plus, which could get you, it's kind of like a get out of jail free card. And one thing that I missed that night was really listening to the instructions that were given. Again, I was feeling sorry for myself. I was tired, I was hungry. I think my feet were already wet. I was thinking about the task at hand. And those instructions were that at night, limited visibility as they called it, when you go to do a map check, you'll take your poncho out of your rucksack, you will go to a knee. You will cover yourself with the poncho, and at that time you can retrieve your map and your red lens flashlight, And only at that time can you flick your red lens flashlight on and do a map check. Under no other circumstances. And what was the why there? The why was for that noise and light discipline, really the light discipline, that when you're in combat, if you have a negligent discharge with the light, just like with a weapon, you've compromised your position, and the enemy now knows where you are. And not only have you put yourself at risk, but you put your entire team at risk. And so that was the lesson there that I was too immature to fully absorb at that moment. So I've smoked through the first 2 points. I'm on my way to the third point. I'm feeling good. I'm like, I'm gonna get all these before sunrise, and I'm gonna get some sleep because, you know, I'm gonna finish as one of the first ones. And on the way to the third point, we get to a water crossing. I get to a water crossing. And I remember looking, and I see a bunch of red lens flashlights kind of all around me, probably about 15 of them. And so what do? I pull out my red lens flashlight and I lean up against a tree and I have my map and I kind of cut it on and say, you know, one, where did this water, I didn't see this swamp on the map. And two, how am I going to get around it and then replot my point so I can continue to that point. And after about 10 seconds with my red lens on, right before I cut it off, I heard, "Ranger, freeze." And there was a ranger instructor with night vision goggles that was watching all of us. And so I stood there while everybody else cut their red lens flashlights off and scurried like a bunch of rats when the lights cut on. And he came right up to me and he grabbed my scorecard and he took it and he wrote SOR on it, which stood for Serious Observation Report. And he said, "What were the instructions, Ranger?" And I kind of sat there, didn't say anything. I knew what they were. And he said, exactly what I told you a minute ago. He told me why you do this, why after he has returned from multiple combat deployments and he's now an instructor, he's seen that firsthand and he knows how real that is with life or death. And so I finished. He told me to continue to train. I found the rest of my points. I turned in my scorecard, and when I went to turn it in, because I wasn't really sure what the SOR, Serious Observation Report, meant. I thought it was going to mean that I was going to definitely be on the chopping block, but I thought I would be able to continue forward if I was doing what I was supposed to. And the instructor took my scorecard, and he said, "Good job, Ranger." And he said, "Wait a minute, you're going to sit over here. You're an SOR violation." So I go and I sit over here, and I'm the first one over there, and I'm like, what? And I'm so mad at myself, and then I'm also playing the victim card. And I see everybody come in, and a lot of people are going this way. I've got about another 5 or 6. I think by the end, there were about 22 that were considered SOR violations out of the group of maybe what was left, 150. And what that meant when they explained it to me was that you failed to follow instructions. And an SOR violation is a serious offense. And you actually can get kicked out of the program, never to return, or you can be a day one recycle, meaning you got to start all the way back over. And the risk I ran when I went to Ranger School was, as fate has it, it was right before the Best Ranger competition, and there's a gap of 30 days. They don't have a course in April. So all those recycles go to a place called the Gulag, which is basically what it is, a prison work camp. No connectivity with the outside world. You eat when they tell you to eat, you sleep when they tell you to sleep, and you go out and you're beautifying the woods because the Discovery Channel's coming and you got to get everything looking nice. We're painting rocks. We're raking pine straw, we're pressure washing, we're doing all these things. And I get to about day 29 and I am done. I'm so mad. I already had it planned out that if I'd made it straight through Ranger School, I would make it to one of my best friend's weddings in Key West, and it was all going to work out as I had planned. And when that happened, that obviously derailed everything. So day 29 of being in the Gulag, I say, I'm going to go throw it in. I'm going to go tell the colonel he can take his Ranger tab and shove it. I'll come back when I want to, you know. And Johnny shows up out there. And the first thing he does is gives me a hard time. He's laughing and making fun of me. And he says, "Well, how you doing?" I said, "How do you think I'm doing, Johnny?" I was like, "I'm sitting here rotting away. I need to be with the soldiers that I'm going to lead." And I wanted to go to that wedding. And I was so immature at the time that I didn't realize when you sign up for Ranger School, it is not the ease of the indulgence that you're in it for, which the ease was quitting if it didn't go my way. The ease was getting to my buddy's wedding. It was the discipline and the sacrifice to do what was right. Because you need to show up to that unit and not have excuses for what should have happened, what could have happened. And the first thing Johnny said to me is he said, you're not going to quit, and let me tell you why. Because there's guys with tabs and there's guys with stories. And the stories are the excuses for why they never finished. And you don't want to be that guy. And I took that to heart, and I knew he was right, and I was angry because I knew he was right. And that's all he said. And we went on to talk about other things, and his son that you saw a picture of, Kalen, that we called Bubba, he was out there, and we were throwing the football, and he brought me some books to read. And that was the last time I ever saw Johnny. Johnny was killed in Baghdad about 6 months later. And so that was another one of those very real moments that I reflect on. And it happened after I graduated Ranger School. I did do what he told me to, and I stayed in, and I used that as my driving force, thinking about what he told me. And he was leading his men outside Baghdad when an improvised explosive device took his life. And Johnny did more for me and continues, just by the legacy that he leaves, to do more for me and a lot of other officers that he took under his wing than he'll ever fully comprehend. And I wear my accountability bracelet, which is a killed in action bracelet, for still those moments. We're all flawed, we're all humans. We all have our bad days to look down and remember that what should I be doing? What could I be doing to get better? To not be bitter, but to get better because of it. Because that's the way that he led. And that's the way that he portrayed himself to us, to his family, and was just a remarkable impact on my life. And this is kind of the Where's Waldo photo from when we graduated. Probably from where you are, you can't find me, and I'll give somebody $100 if they can point it out. But we all look the same. We're just about 35 or 40 pounds lighter. So I went right through, and I used the things that he told me, and the realization that leadership was not easy is my every time something's going on, stop and think and be intentional about what you're about to do, because it's those choices that are going to define who you become and what you're able to achieve. So I graduate Ranger School, and I go on to lead 3 different platoons in combat in the eastern provinces of Afghanistan with the 173rd Airborne Brigade Combat Team, and had a great deployment. We were over there for 16 months, which is a long time when you're doing birthdays and Christmas a few times and Thanksgiving a few times. But what we did is we really alienated and isolated the enemy by working by, with, and through the locals. We were essentially doing what I would find out to be a Green Beret mission as an infantry officer with young infantrymen. And that was a great experience. I had a few guys get wounded. By the grace of God, we didn't lose anybody. And I came back and I was going to get out. And then about 10 of my good friends in the 173rd, which is in Vicenza, Italy, we all decided to go to Special Forces assessment and selection together and see if we had what it took to get an invitation to come to the Special Forces qualification course to earn the Green Beret. So we went. And miraculously, I think 9 out of the 10 of us got selected, and I decided to stay in the military and go try this out and see what it was about. And it was probably the coolest experience I ever had, because you got to be on a small elite team with 11 others, a warrant officer, you had your weapons sergeants, your engineer and demolition sergeants, your medical sergeants, communication sergeants, intelligence sergeant, and you had your senior enlisted advisor that was your operations sergeant, and your second in command as a warrant officer, so you could run split teams of 6 and 6. And this was with the mountain detachment, and we found ourselves back in Afghanistan again. And it took us a while to get this team to what it was, because they were not the most functional group when the team sergeant and I came in. They had a lot of different things that they had been allowed to do that had really created a lack of discipline inside the organization. So our change had to be intentional, it had to be focused, it had to be endearing to them so that they would accept it. And that's what we did, is we trained up to go back to Afghanistan, this time to southern Afghanistan. And has anybody ever seen that TED Talk that Robert Waldinger did about the adult development study at Harvard? I see a few folks shaking their head yes. So it's, I believe, the oldest existing study that's still going, survey that's still going on right now, 75 years old, tracking 724 men through all walks of life. And 60 are still alive today. And it was really asking them a series of questions. What's the most important thing you want to get out of life? And the thing that they did was they kept consistency with the questions they asked as they followed them. And this question when they were young was they wanted to get famous, they wanted to get wealthy, they wanted that power. And what they found as they got older was that stuff didn't really matter. What mattered the most was deep and meaningful relationships. They had, like we talked about, they had seen folks that started from nothing and rise up and up and up. And they saw folks that started with a lot and had a downward trajectory because they weren't able to do that. And the ones that are still alive, they accredit being alive to the fact that they have those human connections. They have that bond with others. And there was also a recent article that the Harvard Business Review published about loneliness in America, and said that over 40% of adults in America report feeling lonely. They said that over 50% of CEOs feel that way because they lack that connection in the workplace. It's a transaction. It's not anything more than, what are my tasks? What do I need to get accomplished? Am I leading behind a computer screen, or am I getting out and connecting with you? Am I getting out and understanding more than what your roles and responsibilities at work are? And President Obama's Surgeon General Murthy, said when he was practicing and seeing patients, he's quoted in that article, he said the most common disease that he saw in all his time was not heart disease, was not diabetes, it was loneliness. It was the chronic illnesses that people would have and not being able to cope and heal because they lacked that connection. They lacked that human connection. So think about that. Think about what you can do differently right now inside your organizations to address this, because it is real. I think about a lot of my friends in the military that are now out. You go from a purpose-driven life. You know what you're doing. You know where you're going. You know what your mission is. To you're out and you're just in a sea of people now. I talked to a friend last week who's in Raleigh, North Carolina, and his wife and children were going to see her family. And you want to talk about a guy that was down in the dumps, that hasn't made any friends in Raleigh, that's working for a big medical device company. He's down, and he needs my support. He needs a lot of our support to get him back out of that so he can show up and be the best husband, the best father, the best leader inside that organization, because he's got tremendous talent that he could offer them. And right now it's all bucketed up inside, and he's gone down that path that can be very destructive. And there's countless other examples like that that I could share with you. But the biggest thing for us in building the relationships is it starts with trust. It starts with the trust and transparency. It starts with being vulnerable and willing to share some of the failures, admit some of the mistakes that you've had. Because people, do we have any Alabama fans in here? I know we're right across the border here. Here we go. So Nick Saban talks about share your struggles more than your successes, because that's what people can relate with. Same thing we're doing. It doesn't mean that it defines you. It just means that you learn from it and you got back up and you had that resiliency to continue forward. This picture right here is in a town in northern Kandahar that we lived in. It was in the Shawalikot district. And those mountains in the background, we called the belly button, because anytime there was one way in, one way out. Anytime we went in there, we got into a gunfight. It was a nasty area. This was kind of the mountain resort for the enemy. And the green that you can see right behind there is where we were living. We were spending all of our time up on that hillside, so we were out of sight, out of mind. And then we would go down in the village and put on Afghan attire, relate with the tribesmen. When we first showed up, we cleared 36 improvised explosive devices just to open up traffic again to this village, because the enemy had laced the roads, the wadis, the dried out riverbeds with bombs. And we cleared it, so we showed up and we thought we were going to be heroes, and everybody shut their doors and said they didn't want to talk to us. So I now had 5 interpreters that were gainfully unemployed. So we had to take a step back and think outside the box. What can we do? The kids, just like kids here, just like kids anywhere, are mischievous, they're curious. They were coming up and harassing us and asking for candy or anything else. So I took those interpreters, and it was a group effort, and we decided we were going to use the interpreters to start teaching classes to the kids because they didn't have a school in this village. So we had about 15 kids. The second day we had about 30 kids. It turned out we had to break it into 2 different classes because we almost had 75 kids. And what we were doing was, as the interpreters were doing that, we were kind of up on the side of this ridge line, and we were watching which tribesmen were coming by, and they were going a different route with their wheelbarrows to get to their fields, and looking over and seeing what we were doing, because that was who we wanted to connect with. Their children were obviously the ones that were learning from us. So we started to draw on the maps where these people lived. We followed that person and see where they'd go back to their house. And then the first thing we did was, once we identified our main person, it was a giant, just incredible guy named Hirajan. We went, put Afghan clothes on, took 2 guys with me, set up an overwatch position, took an interpreter, and at 1 o'clock in the morning, walked down in the village, had to avoid all the dogs, which are the early warning network, and once one barks, they all start barking. And we got to his mud hut, to his kalat is what they call it. We rapped on the door quietly, and you could see a lantern go on. He came and he opened the door, and he was trembling with fear. And we greeted him and asked if we could meet with him. And he reluctantly, and still to this day don't know why, he said yes. And he said, "Give me a minute, and please go around the side of my house and go sit in our little guest house," which was probably about twice the size of this red rug. It was pretty tight, pretty intimate, and the ceilings were about this high. So first thought that runs in my mind is he's going to send us in there, and that's a death trap. And we go in there, totally vulnerable, now out of the field of fire that we had a position set up so they could cover us. And we go in there, and he comes back, and he's got chai. He's got the green tea. And he pours us cups of tea, and he sits, and we get to know one another. We ask him about his family. We ask him about his tribe. We share stories about our families, about our faith, about the difference in Christianity and Islam. And we just get to know him as a person, get to relate as a person. I'm not in body armor. I'm not in camouflage. I'm trying to connect. And we ask him, we have a great conversation for about an hour and a half, and I can tell he's starting to get uneasy. And we ask him, can we come back? And he says, whoa, which means yes, and he agrees. So the next night we come back, and he's got one of his cousins, and he's got another trusted tribesman in the village there. And what we did night after night, and keep in mind, this took us 60 days just to get to this point, because nobody would talk to us. 60 days living on the side of a mountain, getting rocketed and shot at, and mortars lobbed at us. And you're trying to lead a team of Green Berets that are honestly at the tipping point of just wanting to go kick in doors and find bad guys. And now we're trying to also relate to the human component and build relationships. And so after doing that for about a week straight, this group has grown so large that everybody's hungry for it, that we can go overt. We can start meeting during the daytime. And we knew it wasn't going to be easy, and we knew the enemy, one of the biggest bomb makers in Kandahar, was from that village. And we knew that there were a lot of people that didn't want us there and that worked with him. His name was Tor John. And we knew that he was going to be reporting back. And so Tor John showed back up one night about month 3, and he roughed some people up. He left night letters on the doors and tried to pacify that entire village with 2 other thugs. That's who he came back with. The next day, we're feeling good. We get up. We're like, this is going to be a great day. And all the villagers are sitting right outside of our little kalat, our mud hut. They say, we can't communicate with you anymore. We're done. It's over. You need to leave. They're threatening to kidnap our children, put them in the sex trade, which exists over there. They threatening to kill them, threatening to put bombs at our doorsteps. And We took a step back and we were not prepared for that. We sat there and we were like, no, stay the course. And they said, absolutely not. What would you do if they came to your door and did that back where you live and put it back on us? So we met for another hour, had a stalemate. I was very frustrated. That night, we decided to go back down into the village, and we had our interpreters put night letters on all the doors of the same individuals that had been threatened, that were working with us, that we wanted to train to become Afghan local police. And the next day they showed up and just a light bulb had gone off. We put on there that we are here to work alongside them, that do not let a few pacify the many, and that if they stood up together, because they were so distrustful as a community, they had their little networks, and for the most part they would not trust one another. It was masters of manipulation. And so they show up and we had put on there, work with us, let us train you so you can defend yourselves. Don't let 2 or 3 pacify this entire village. We're here for you, we love you, and we're going to support you. And that was what it took. And I've got some photos on here to show you of some of these Afghan noble giants. If I can get this, I might get some help from the back. But as we started to do that, it grew and grew. We had 23 Afghan local police that we ended up getting to come on board and say that they wanted to defend their village. And because of that, this is not my picture. I don't know if it's showing up for y'all. Because of that, we were able.
We're working on it. We're having some different.
Okay, no worries.
Bear with us.
So we were able to take that and spread it from this village that we lived in back to that belly button area. There was a town called Gumbad, and we started getting them interested because they had a thirst for what that looked like, what that freedom. The Green Beret motto is De Oppresso Liber, which is free the oppressed. And now they had a feeling of what that was because they had never been exposed to it before. And this guy right here, this is Nanat. Nanat was a Mujahideen commander. He had also been a cook for the Mujahideen, and he was one of the best marksmen I'd ever seen. He could take iron sights, which is just when you're shooting down the barrel of your gun, and he could actually hit targets, in my opinion, better than my guys could with the scope on their weapon. So he was a masterful tactician. These Afghans, you know, we all like to pass judgment on one another. They may not be educated, but they're survivors. They know how to survive. And he had all kinds of wisdom to offer us when we started to look at how we're going to break down the enemy, how we're going to effectively alienate and isolate them. And so I'm talking to him right here about strategy, about what we're going to do, how we're going to put and strategically position people through the village where if anybody tries to come in, they're not going to be able to get out if they're trying to come do harm to any of his villagers. And again, what I talked about, we did that cross-cultural multinational. We also had to do it with other forces, with Navy SEALs that were attached to us for 30 days, 60 days, Air Force combat controllers. You put a bunch of Type A special operations forces in a room together, and it's like watching alpha male dogs run around in circles, kind of sizing and sniffing each other up. And you got to work through that, and you got to realize what each person brings to bear. We bring a different capability than some of our brothers and sisters in other units and other divisions of the military. And we had these guys attached to us, and they were our force multipliers because they brought 35 Afghan commandos to the fight. When we'd go helicopter in under the cover of darkness and go into a village where we were looking for somebody, these were my ants that spread out and were able to go and find who we were looking for. And it was critical to maintain good rapport and to build those relationships and to establish that trust. And we also had a lot of fun because you wanted to be able to connect on the human side and not lose focus of that. I was explaining it to Ed backstage, but when you're out and you're doing everything you can to survive and you're getting in engagements where I'm talking about shooting back and forth and bullets are flying by you and it's very real, it can desensitize you and it can really make you lose touch with humanity when you're doing that day in and day out. So the way that we countered that on our team is we made sure that we were kicking the soccer ball A lot of the Green Berets have families, just like I do. They got young kids. They've got loving spouses that are running the household in their absence. And when you come home, you got to be able to connect back with your families. So we did things like this. I had a friend that worked for a circus, and they'd always send us clown noses and these little glasses, and we'd go around and hand them out to the villagers, and it was comical to watch them put these things on, and we'd show them pictures. We'd print out pictures to give them, and it was just ways that we were trying to figure out how to connect with them. And again, the takeaway, if we can do that over there, why can't you do it inside your organization? Why can't you connect to a deeper level with the folks that you're charged and responsible to have that blessing to lead? So reflect on ways you can. This is another one of the one that's blurred in the middle there, that was Hirajan. That was the first guy that took a chance with us and that believed in us. And this was one of the last nights we were there. I was very honest and upfront with them that we were not going to be there forever, that we were there for a short amount of time, and they had a decision to make. They had a choice to make. We could help train them so they could defend themselves, or we could leave and go somewhere else. And it was not an easy journey, as I told you. It took showing up day in and day out, and patience is one of my hardest things to overcome, as I want it done yesterday. And I had to realize that and temper my own struggles with a lot of other leaders on that team. So we would break bread with them. This is down in the village. At this time, this is an Afghan wedding reception. They split male and female. And the Pashtun culture is very private in regards to any Americans, really any Afghan men being able to see their women. They wear the veils when they go down to get water. They keep it very separate. And at that time, when we were there, we were the only team embedded in a village that I knew of that got invited to a wedding reception. And we brought a guitar, and I can tell you this, that room smelled pretty bad. I don't think we had showered in like 60 days. I don't know when these Afghans had showered. And it was a great night, though, that they didn't want to end. And the guy that's holding the guitar right there, his brother was a Taliban commander. I'm almost certain he was a taxi driver. I'm almost certain that he had driven his brother and others to conduct reconnaissance on the routes that we were using to figure out where to put improvised explosive devices in the road. And we had won him over. You talk about a metric of success. That was the definition of success for us. We had established that trust. We had established that relationship. And the last night after we graduated them, we did a slideshow for them. They'd never seen anything like that. They don't have cable television. They don't have cameras and take pictures. So we put that up and we showed them the 3-week training that we sent them through. And one of the Afghans came up to me with tears, and he told the interpreter that he had never felt the feeling that he was feeling. That he was so excited and so proud to be a member of that village, and that he could defend everybody else and he could defend those children. That was a measure of success. It wasn't how many bad guys we killed. It was what did we do to inspire and connect and pass the baton so that this village could stand up for themselves and we could actually go home and go be back with our families. And those were the things that I took away from it. This is one of the last nights telling them goodbye and just kind of telling them what we expect out of them now. And as they say to everything, inshallah, which means God willing, inshallah, we may see them again one day in a different context, in a different setting. My first interpreter that worked with the British forces, it's pretty funny. He's got a British accent for his English translation, but he just moved to the United States with his family. He was on the emergency relief immigration program, and they were able to get him because he had so many death threats because he worked with the Americans. He's got 2 young children that are now going to taste what our families get to experience and take for granted, and he lives outside of D.C. He's a project manager. I'm going to figure out a time before the end of the year to fly up there and go see him, but I never thought that could happen, and it did, and he's here. And it's absolutely incredible to think about the magnitude of what that is from where he was to where he is now today. So I want to leave you with a couple nuggets. I've got a little bit of time left as kind of the challenges to you. And what am I doing now? I got to join a great group this year called the Presidential Leadership Scholars Group. It's with both President Bush's, it's with President Clinton and President Johnson's foundation. And it's of 60 scholars from across the country. That it is probably the most powerful network of just real people I've ever been exposed to, because they're all doing amazing things in their communities, and they are looking at, just like the Community Institute here, ways to transform where they are and living and working and leading in alignment with their values, with their purpose, with their passion. And that group allowed me to get to meet some of the presidents, and what I thought was cool, and I don't know if it'll go back, is I had the chance to sit down with my former commander-in-chief and break bread over a 3-hour dinner with him and just share stories from Afghanistan. And a lot of people did not like or respect this man when he was in office. And this group that we had was bipartisan, so we had a lot of people that saw things differently. And what we did is we focused on civility and humility with everything that we did, and how we got into debates, arguments, whatever you want to call them. And we sat at the dinner that night. Both sides agreed that what he's doing in the presidential afterlife, as he calls it, is truly a testament to his character and the type of human being that he is, because he loves people. And you can get divisive with politics or anything that you want, but you want to see the testament of leadership, see what they're doing when they're out of the spotlight, because he's dedicated his life to post-9/11 veterans, to our wounded warriors. And he runs 6 different global initiatives, and one of them is on the post-9/11 veterans. And I never thought I'd have the chance to sit down and joke and laugh and share those types of stories that I did. And I still pinch myself to think how great of an experience that was. And really what I took away from it was that incredible network that I now have across the country of people that are doing amazing things in their communities. And I encourage anybody in this audience that wants to do more, to be better, to become more, and to reach outside your comfort zone, apply for that. It's a phenomenal opportunity. And it's only on its 3rd year, and that's going to continue to grow, and you're going to see this group do amazing things. I truly believe it. And I've put this slide out in the lobby there that you can take away, because it's got a lot of content. But this is the model we follow now. We work with a friend of mine who's a leadership expert out of Virginia. And the servant leader model we follow, it starts with awareness. I went and got my license for the Insights Discovery Self-Awareness Personality Assessment, which I find to be one of the most accurate that I've ever taken. And that's what we do inside our organizations, is we start with who and how we are. What are kind of the characteristics of my personality, and how are they different from yours, and how can we relate and connect? And then you take it from that self-awareness and you look at your engagement. And I think it's blurry up here, so I apologize. But the engagement portion of it is how you show up. Are you casting a good wake, or are you casting a bad wake? Are you bruising and battering people along the way, like we talked about? Or are you actually connecting with them and treating them how they deserve to be treated? So you take it from the awareness, you take it to the engagement, you take it to the performance, which is the impact. And that's, again, that impact. You're telling them what the left and right limits are. You're giving them the resources they need to be successful. And you're checking in with them. You're giving them feedback. As leaders, we have to provide feedback. We do it 4 times a year in a structured environment. But you should be doing it every week with the communication feeds and the check-ins, letting them know that they're doing everything that was asked of them. Or if they're not, help them correct it. Help them get it right, so that they don't wait until a 6-month review or an end-of-year review to tell them the things they've screwed up. And the same, ask for feedback. Ask for that employee engagement survey. Because everybody out there is professional boss watchers. If you're in a leadership role, then you're being judged. You're being analyzed. So get that feedback so you're not out of touch with reality. And it feeds into the loop of self-reflection. I may not like all the feedback I get, but I need to listen to it. And I can get defensive, I can get angry, or I can actually sit back and go back to General Sam's quote And I can be humble enough to say, okay, well, that was not how I wanted to be interpreted, so I need to find a better way to communicate, a better way to relate to my teammates, because they're not going to see it the way that you see it. They're not mind readers either. They're not going to know what's going on inside your head. So think about that. And what we used to call in the military was our battle rhythm. When you've got your purpose and values, you've got your passions, and you've got your strengths, your competencies, and those begin to overlap, that was our battle rhythm. We call it flow for us in the workplace, but it's an extension of one another, because that very important instrument of communication is right there at the front and center, and how you do it. In this quote, one's philosophy is not best expressed in words, it's expressed in the choices one makes. In the long run, we shape our lives and we shape ourselves. The process never ends until we die, and the choices we make are ultimately our own responsibility. The choices we make are ultimately our own responsibility. You heard the choices I made in Ranger School. I could have let that define me and gone on to live a life of excuse, or I could take a step back and get back in the fight. I really appreciate you all having me today. I wish you all the best. I'll be around if anybody wants to have a conversation offline, and good luck to you. Thank you.
Wow. I don't know about you, but I feel very, very humble and certainly inspired. We've had some great, great speakers today, all kinds of different speakers from Bert, from Brad, but gosh, I feel filled up and motivated by what we've learned today. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Wow. So we've got a break now. It's lunchtime. Enjoy that lunch, or if you're going to the Lunch and Learn, have a fabulous time there. And we'll see you back here at 12:30 for Liz Jaswick, one of the breakout sessions, or we've got the 3 others running at the different venues this afternoon. Enjoy, and we'll see you this afternoon. And we've got Dan Heath closing out the day, so stick around for that.